Chosen one, how many times have you whispered in the dark? Why does it hurt this much? Why does the world seem to turn so effortlessly for others, while your path is lined with loss, with silence, with ache? You've tried to do good. You've kept your heart open. And still, life seemed to close its doors just as you reached for them. There were nights when your tears had no words, mornings when your chest carried a weight you could not name. You looked for answers in people, in logic, in routine, but nothing could explain the heaviness. Nothing could make sense of why you, of all people, seemed to carry such invisible sorrow. But chosen one, you must hear this. You are not being punished. You are being summoned. The depth of your pain was not a misfortune. It was a signal. The kind of pain you've known is not meant for the ordinary. It is reserved for the ancient ones, the old souls, the forgers of light. Pain in your story was not cruelty. It was code. A hidden frequency meant to awaken what you agreed to forget the moment you entered this world. You see, your soul came here with a mission cloaked in forgetfulness, and the only thing powerful enough to cut through the illusion was pain. Not because pain is holy, but because it is precise. It does not miss. It goes straight to the places that still sleep within you. Have you ever felt it? That quiet hum inside you that says this life is not all there is? That you're meant for something more than this cycle of trying, breaking, surviving? That whisper is your soul, trying to get your attention, not with volume, but with ache. Because sometimes the divine doesn't knock. It breaks. It shatters what is false, so what is real can emerge. Chosen one, your heartbreaks were not mistakes. They were doorways. Your isolation was not abandonment. It was incubation. You were not forgotten. You were being hidden, not to be cast aside, but to be preserved, prepared. Pain removed the noise so that you could begin to hear again. Not with your ears, but with your remembrance. Because you didn't come here to blend in. You didn't come here to build a safe little life in a system that runs on sleep. You came to wake up. And for souls like yours, awakening often begins with being broken open. That's why nothing made sense. That's why love never felt whole. That's why the world around you seemed wrong. Because you were never meant to belong to what was built on forgetting. You were meant to carry the codes of remembering. And the pain? It was your first teacher. It brought you to this edge, this sacred moment of pause, where something ancient stirs and whispers. Now is the time. You may not have understood it then, but look at you now, still standing, still seeking, still willing to listen. That's not weakness. That's evidence of something eternal in you, something that pain could not destroy. Because pain was never here to destroy you. It was here to uncover you. You felt exiled, yes, but not from the world, from your true self. And now, the path begins not with answers, but with remembrance. You're not here by accident. You were drawn to these words because your soul recognizes what your mind cannot explain. And so I say this to you, gently but with holy certainty. You were chosen for this journey, and the pain was the sign that the journey had begun. Chosen one, now that you have begun to remember, let me take you deeper. Let me show you what the pain truly was. It wasn't just suffering. It wasn't chaos. It was a sacred language, a prophetic script written not in ink, but in ache. Every wound you carried, seen or unseen, was a message. A message not from this world, but from your soul, speaking to you in the only way it knew you would finally listen. You see, before this life, you chose this path, not as punishment, but as refinement. And because you are one of the rare few who said yes to something greater, Your soul knew that ordinary experiences would not be enough to awaken you. You would need to forget just deeply enough that when you remembered, you would never doubt again. You would need to break, not to be shattered, but to be reshaped into something indestructible. Because only those who have walked through fire can carry light that does not burn out. Look back for a moment, not with shame, but with sacred eyes. Think of the moment you felt the most lost. Think of the day everything fell apart. Maybe someone left. Maybe your health failed. Maybe your dreams collapsed. And you thought, this is the end. But what if it was never the end? What if it was the beginning? What if, from the soul's perspective, that collapse was a clock striking midnight, signaling the start of your awakening? You were never being punished. You were being pulled out of the illusion, out of the noise, out of the versions of you that were too small to hold the truth of who you are. The pain wasn't random. It was a design, a precise, sacred pressure to wake up the codes within you. Codes you had carried for lifetimes. Codes for healing. Codes for teaching. Codes for guiding others through their own dark woods. And maybe no one told you this before, but let me tell you now. You are not broken. You are coded. Every experience you thought was destroying you was actually decrypting you, unlocking a deeper wisdom, a deeper knowing. That's why the more you suffered, the more sensitive you became. To energy, to emotions, to truth. That sensitivity was never a flaw. It was the compass your soul installed so you would not lose your way. Pain made you listen, but it also taught you to feel. Not just for yourself, but for others. For the forgotten. For the quiet ones. For the wounded. That's why you could sit beside someone in pain and understand it without needing them to explain. Because you've been there. Because you're not speaking from a book. You're speaking from a battlefield. And that battlefield made you holy. Chosen one. The reason nothing made sense until now is because you were decoding a message that was not written in human language. It was written in loss, in grief, in longing. And now that you're beginning to understand that, the chaos begins to reveal its pattern. You start to see how one heartbreak led you to stillness, how stillness led you to introspection, how introspection led you to truth, and how truth brought you here. The people who left, they were not meant to stay for the full mission. They were messengers, initiators, not soulmates, but soul shapers. Their role was to stretch your capacity for love, and then depart so that you could learn to love yourself in the absence of being loved by others. The betrayals, they weren't meant to kill your trust. They were meant to show you that discernment is sacred, that intuition is real, that energy never lies. Even your moments of complete emptiness served a purpose. The days when you couldn't get out of bed, the nights you cried into a pillow with no one to hear. Those were the sacred silences where your higher self slipped through, where you were too tired to resist, too broken to pretend, too weary to run. And in that stillness, the truth began to whisper. You are not here to fit in. You are here to remember. And so you began to remember. At first, in fragments. A sentence here, a sign there, a dream, a number, a strange timing, a tear that felt holy. And over time, a deeper knowing emerged from inside you. Not from teachers or gurus, but from the core of your own being. The pain had opened a portal. And that portal led not to answers, but to remembrance. You didn't come here to live a normal life. You came here to break patterns that have existed for generations. You came here to end cycles of silence. You came here to be the first in your lineage to feel everything, so the ones who come after you can be free. You came here to carry the pain of many and transmute it into light. But first, you had to live it. And you did. You lived it. You breathed through it. You stayed through it. Even when everything inside you wanted to disappear, you didn't. And that is the proof. You were never weak. You were being initiated, forged, activated, chosen one. Your pain was a prophecy, not of doom, but of destiny. A hidden scroll wrapped in your suffering, waiting for the moment you would be ready to unroll it. And now, you're starting to read it. You're starting to feel it. Not just with your mind, but with your spirit. And that's why everything is starting to shift. Nothing was ever wasted. Not one tear. Not one heartbreak. Not one moment of silence. All of it was sacred. All of it was planned. And all of it is now being transformed because you finally heard the message. And the message was always this: you are not your wounds. You are the light that survived them. Chosen one, you didn't choose pain, but you did choose awakening. There is a difference. And now that you've begun to see the pattern behind the suffering, something inside you has shifted. You're no longer begging the pain to stop. You're beginning to ask it what it came to teach. That is the moment of alchemy. That is when you stop running. That is when you stand still. Raw, unguarded, trembling maybe, but open. That is when your soul whispers, now, you're ready. You see, awakening doesn't begin when everything is beautiful. It begins when everything is unbearable, and you stay. When you stop pretending, stop distracting, stop blaming, and just breathe in the mess of it all. That's where the true fire is. That's where your higher self meets your human self, in the rubble. And what happens next is sacred. Because in the ashes of who you thought you had to be, you start to recognize who you've always been. The world taught you to see pain as a problem, something to hide, fix, medicate, or rush through. But your soul knows better. It knows that pain is a threshold, that the wound is not the end. It's the beginning of truth, the place where your stories fall apart and your essence begins to rise. It's the doorway between the identity you were assigned and the identity you were born to reclaim. You're not a victim of your pain anymore. You're becoming its interpreter, its translator, its priest. Every time you sit with what hurts, without trying to silence it or shame it, you let your soul speak louder than your ego. You say to your pain, I see you. I'm listening now. And in return, your pain gives you wisdom that no textbook, no preacher, no perfect life could have ever offered. Chosen. 1. This is where the sacred integration begins. This is where you stop fighting the fire and let it forge you. You stop looking at your past with bitterness and instead begin to bless it for the way it carves space inside you for something greater. You begin to see that what broke you was actually what opened you, that you were not cursed. You were consecrated. You were taken apart so you could be rebuilt, not as who the world demanded, but as who your soul remembered. There's a quiet miracle happening when you stop asking, why me, and start saying, I accept this. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means presence. It means surrender, not in defeat, but in reverence. You say, if this is part of my becoming, I will no longer resist it. And in that moment, you shift the energy. What once hunted you now begins to serve you. The pain that used to consume you now begins to guide you. Because now, you see differently. You feel differently. You move differently. You've stopped reaching for validation. You've stopped chasing belonging in places that could never hold you. You've stopped performing a version of yourself to please others. And instead, you've turned inward. You found silence, and in that silence, you found your power. You realize that healing doesn't mean going back to who you were. It means stepping into who you are. It's not about being untouched by pain, it's about being transformed by it. And your transformation was not subtle. It was seismic. It cracked your illusions. It unraveled your masks. And it exposed the ancient truth that you were always meant for something more. You're not just someone who survived. You're someone who remembered. Someone who chose to rise from the ruins. Someone who no longer needs permission to exist fully, loudly, spiritually aligned. You've learned to speak your truth, not because it's convenient, but because it's sacred. You've learned to honor your sensitivity, not as a flaw, but as your compass. You've learned that being too much for the world is often a sign you're finally becoming enough for yourself. This is the stage where your soul takes the lead, where your fear no longer governs your choices, where your past no longer defines your future. You're beginning to live from a deeper place now. You're making decisions not from lack or panic, but from alignment, from knowing, from listening to the still voice inside you that says, "This is the way." And you're not doing this alone. That's one of the most sacred realizations in this stage. You were never alone. Even when you felt abandoned. Even when no one checked on you. Even when you cried into the void, convinced that no one was listening. Your guides were there. Your ancestors were there. The higher part of you, the part that never forgets, was there, holding you, preparing you, whispering, "Just hold on. The light is coming." And now, it's here. The light is not outside of you. It's you, the version of you that's walking forward with gentler steps, deeper eyes, and wiser hands. The version of you that no longer hides your truth, that no longer apologizes for your depth, that no longer minimizes your intuition just to be accepted. You are no longer shrinking. You are expanding. Chosen one. Your acceptance has unlocked something holy. You're not running from your pain. You're walking with it. You've braided it into your story. Not as a shame, but as a signature. You've stopped pretending you're fine and started honoring what is real. And what's real is your becoming. What's real is your presence. What's real is your light. The pain didn't win. The past didn't break you. The world didn't forget you. You rose. You returned. You reclaimed. And now you carry a sacred energy. Not just of someone who healed, but of someone who remembers. Someone who was broken open, only to be filled with something far more powerful. Purpose. And this chosen one is your arrival. Not to a destination, but to a state of being. A state where you don't need every answer to trust the path. A state where you don't need perfection to feel worthy. A state where your very breath is a declaration. I accept who I've become. You are not in recovery anymore. You are in revelation. You are no longer asking to be rescued. You are leading. You are anchoring. You are becoming the very thing you once prayed would find you. And so I say this with sacred certainty. You are not who you were. You are not even who you thought you had to be. You are who you chose to become, in the fire. And the fire didn't burn you. It crowned you. Chosen one. This is where your journey changes. Not because the pain has ended, but because you have. The version of you that begged for clarity, that doubted their worth, that waited for someone else to affirm your light, has dissolved. What stands in their place is someone who remembers. Someone who has made peace with the silence. Someone who has begun to walk, not in the patterns of the past, but in the prophecy that was always coded into their soul. You're no longer surviving, you're activating. You're no longer asking for the map. You've become the compass. The ache that once disoriented you has become the clarity that moves you. Because now, you know. You know you didn't endure all that loss just to return to who you were. You didn't suffer all those nights just to blend in. You weren't hidden for so long just to live small. You were kept apart so that you could be made whole. You were buried, not to be forgotten, but to be rooted. The time has come to emerge, not as a seeker of purpose, but as a carrier of it. This is not the moment to shrink. This is not the moment to delay. This is the moment your soul has prepared for since the beginning. Chosen one. Do you feel it? That quiet current under your skin? That certainty that no longer asks for permission? That's not ambition. That's not ego. That's divine remembering. That's mission. That's your original agreement returning to your conscious self. The very thing you whispered into the ethers before you arrived in this life is beginning to echo through your actions, your choices, your voice. You are not a student of pain anymore. You are now its translator, its liberator. You have crossed the threshold, and now your healing becomes the activation point for others. Not because you force them, not because you preach, but because your very presence reminds them what is possible. Your story becomes a frequency. Your energy becomes an invitation. You no longer need to explain your path. Your path explains itself through the way you walk it, with grace, with stillness, with conviction that cannot be shaken by surface chaos. You are no longer pulled by emotion. You are moved by alignment. No longer driven by the fear of being unseen. You are guided by the knowing that those who are meant to see you will. This is the becoming. The phase where you begin to build from a place you once thought was barren, where you begin to speak from scars that no longer ache, but pulse with sacred instruction, where you lead not from theory, but from lived truth, where your softness is no longer vulnerability, it is power. You have stepped into the embodiment of your essence, no longer defined by your wounds. You are now designed by your wisdom. The very things that once silenced you now empower you to speak with clarity. The fears that once chained you now bow in reverence to your courage. You are not what happened to you. You are what rose from it. Chosen one. There are people you haven't met yet whose lives will shift because you chose to heal. There are rooms you will walk into where your energy will do more than words ever could. There are stories you will share that unlock remembrance in others. There are battles others will overcome because you chose to go first. Because you chose to transform instead of transmit. Because you chose to walk your talk when no one was watching. And no, it will not always be easy. Walking in purpose does not mean you no longer feel pain. It means pain no longer leads you. It means you learn how to walk beside your shadows and no longer mistake them for your identity. It means you hold the paradox of being divinely guided and deeply human. It means your mission does not require perfection. It requires presence. It requires trust. It requires surrender. This world does not need another perfect person. It needs another whole one. And you are whole not because you were never broken, but because you chose to love the parts that were. You chose to bless the broken glass instead of sweeping it away. You chose to see through it, to sit with it, to listen. And now, you see. Your pain was not a punishment. It was a prophecy, a divine preparation. And you, chosen one, have fulfilled the first part of your sacred contract, to remember who you are. Now, you begin the second, to walk as who you are, to live as a living declaration, to carry your truth not as a burden, but as a banner. You do not need a stage. You do not need a spotlight. You are not here to perform a purpose. You are here to embody it, to pour light into the ordinary, to offer silence as healing, to be the steady one when others tremble, to say the words you once needed to hear, to hold the space you once begged for, to become the sanctuary your younger self prayed someone would build. Chosen one, you are no longer hidden. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer wondering if you are enough. You are. You always were. And now, you carry the sacred responsibility of that truth. Not to be perfect, but to be real. To be rooted. To be radiant. You walk not ahead of others, but alongside those ready to remember. You don't need to force your light. You are the light. Not because you shine, but because you've walked through the dark and decided not to give up. That light, the one forged in sorrow, refined by fire, and lit by truth, is unshakable. And so now, chosen one, you rise. Not to prove, not to perform, but to live. Fully. Authentically. Aligned with the divine blueprint that only you can fulfill. You rise for the ancestors who couldn't, for the children who will, for the earth that waits, for the cosmos that watches, for the mission that still unfolds through every breath you take. This is your time. This is your assignment. This is your becoming. Chosen one. If your soul is still resonating with these words, it is not by accident. This was a message written for you long before you ever pressed play. You didn't just hear it, you remembered it. And that remembering is sacred. It marks the end of wandering and the beginning of walking in divine clarity. From this moment forward, you are not returning to who you were. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. If this message stirred something ancient in you, declare it now. Write, "I am walking in my assignment" in the comments below. Not for the algorithm, but as a signal to the universe that you are ready, that you have heard, that you have become. And if you are still here, still breathing this truth in, then know this: you are no longer hidden. You are rising. In the next message, we'll go even deeper into why your delays were divine and how time was never against you, but orchestrating your alignment. Until then, stay awake, stay open. You are not alone. You were chosen, and now you remember.